Welcome back to Relentless, guys. This is the first podcast of 2019. I'm very excited for the lineup of guests that I have coming this year. If this is your first time listening, in the past, I've had mostly practitioners from different lines of health and wellness. And in this new year, my goal is to bring you more individuals that have themselves been relentless through difficult times of life. So that's what has brought us here today. And I'm excited about this podcast because it's one that I never really even imagined happening, because I have reconnected with a friend that I was blessed enough to be roommates with in college. And we'll get to more of that story later. But we're here at Relentless. We are helping you build strength in your mental, physical, and emotional aspects of life. And that's what we are hoping to do today. And we're going to get to a lot of topics: friendship, relationships, eating disorders, family, motherhood, lots and lots of things. That's going to be good. But I want to introduce my guest, Theresa. And I still think of you. When I think your name, I think Theresa Loudenslager.
Yeah.
That's what I think in my head, Theresa Loudenslager. But you're not Theresa Loudenslager.
Nope, haven't been for almost 20 years.
I know, right? So you know that, but it's just so funny how our memories.
Yes, but there are still times that I think that too.
Yeah, and you probably see me with long hair.
Yes.
Because I had long hair all the way through college.
Yeah.
So I'm so thankful that you're here.
Well, I'm happy to be here.
We were able to reconnect when I started Relentless. Obviously getting more out there in the public and getting people's stories and starting to talk about topics that were difficult, because the reason, and if you've seen any of my previous stuff, the reason I started this is because my clients come to me in pain. Mm-hmm. They think it's physical pain, but a lot of times it's coming from those mental and emotional aspects of life. Yes. So I knew I couldn't do everything for everyone on my table, a massage table. So I wanted to have a platform for them to find practitioners, find people that they can relate to or learn from that will give them information to help them change.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in doing all that, we found each other, obviously, on social media, because you live a couple hours away. And so we started reconnecting, and I saw what you were doing, you saw what I were doing, and I'm like, why are we having this conversation privately? We need to tell the world.
Absolutely.
So when I put a little blurb out there, because I kind of like to do, hey, this is what's coming up next with my audience, and ask them if they have questions for specific people that I have in, because it's nice to hear questions. For example, my last podcast was on suicide. I have not had to deal with that. So I don't even know the questions to ask. So a lot of times I'll ask the audience, hey, listen, this is who's coming up. What questions do you have you'd like to ask them? So I put a little blurb out there, kind of a tease that I'm going to be interviewing my former roommate, but also my husband's ex-girlfriend, which is true.
Yes,
it is true. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. But first, tell us, a little bit about who you are, what you do, your family, and just kind of give us the background of just the surface right now of who Theresa is.
I'm a wife and mom of 3 boys. Yes, 17, 14, and 10. So we are in the teenage years.
Yes.
No littles anymore. So it's a little, it's different.
Right.
It's definitely
it's a different kind of crazy. That's what
I
would say.
It is. And we're learning to navigate that. We've, our oldest is getting ready to go to college, as you well,
Yes.
You're there too.
Yes.
So yeah, it's been really interesting. But I taught high school English for about 10 years. So my background is language arts, and I write. I have my own blog, which is a passion of mine, and it's kind of my way to just share my faith and also just share some of the real life stuff that you deal with as a mother. Right. And so that's been fun. I've been doing that for about 2.5 years. So that's been a lot of fun. But really, we're very involved in our church. We're very involved in our community. So that's really me.
So you're just a real life woman.
A real life.
Which is what I love. Because a lot of things we see on social media aren't real.
Yes.
And that's like I said, one of the goals for this podcast this year is real people.
Yeah.
Not someone that has a career in something, doing a thing, but just real people that have struggled and have like what my podcast says, have been relentless through those things and have come out on the other side. Because that's what I see a lot of people suffering with is they're stuck.
Yeah.
They're stuck in a situation that happened to them.
Right.
And they're having a hard time coming through it.
Right.
So
and it can be so discouraging looking on social media and seeing the highlight reels, seeing the wonderful sunsets and, all the great things that are happening, which is it's good.
Right.
That's good.
Yes.
But at the same time, it can really discourage women, especially because they feel like they're not measuring up.
Right.
So that's been a big thing, a big reason why I've been doing what I do.
Right. I think a lot of times, like this podcast, your blog is birthed out of a necessity to help people because you can see what's really going on.
Absolutely.
Or you see the need for something, and that was your outlet to be able to help people through that. So let's start back in college. Yes. So I'll tell you what I remember, and then you tell me what you remember. And this may turn into like a dual interview because you may have questions for me too. That'll be fine. But I remember, so showing up on campus, we went to a small college in Tennessee. I had planned to go to a different school, ended up visiting this place and fell in love with the area because I'm a country girl, even though no one knows that. But I remember, showing up at campus. It was a small campus. We actually lived in a house. We had 4 roommates. And in walks this beautiful blonde. And she was so nice and so sweet. And that's honestly what I remember of you throughout our college experience was like, Teresa's just nice. She's just so calm and so sweet and so she's like one of the beautiful, nice people. And that's what I remember. And but to kind of put a framework around how I, teased everyone with this podcast. So I came to college and I didn't want to come home for Christmas. I think it was what it was. So you lived in Michigan. So you're like, come home with me. I'm like, okay. So I came home with you for Christmas. And that was the first time I met David, my husband now. And of course, he's a tall basketball player. So I was like, oh, that's cool. But you're in Indiana and I'm in Tennessee. So that doesn't work for me. And so fast forward through the summer, we're texting or talking like, hey, guess who I'm dating? And I'm like, oh, that's cool. But no big deal because nothing happened. So then you came to school, and I'll let you take over the story, or maybe start back from the beginning of your how you perceived everything. But I think we were all in the same group of friends, so we were all like probably maybe 8 or 10 of us that were like a solid core. We always had breakfast together. We had the breakfast club. We ate together all the time. If a couple of us were in sports, if we weren't in the sports, we were hanging out, and it was just a great core group of friends. It really was. And I think we've all in some way kept in contact. Of course, life gets busy. But, and then from there, I think you guys had a relationship and for many reasons and reasons that maybe didn't even aware of, it just didn't work. It didn't sync. And that was okay.
It was just, incompatible.
Right.
We were, 2 very different people and we knew that. And I think, and it wasn't anything wrong or crazy or, like it wasn't a bad breakup in any way. I mean, we grew up together, so we knew each other for a really long time. So it was kind of, we were friends. So we just went back to being friends.
It was like, kind of like an agreeable, amicable. And that's how people always say, well, how long did you wait before you, I'm like, well, we were always all friends and he handled it well. I thought if he would have hurt you, I would never have dated him, So I think that was, for me, it was like a good thing to see. And then you guys just kind of had that amicable, it's just not right. And I think that's something people can take away right now is some things aren't meant to be. And that's okay. I mean, everything can't work out perfectly in life, but you learn from those situations and you grow and you make different decisions later or whatever. But I think it's such a testament for where we were in life that we didn't let that hinder our friendship. Right. Is that kind of?
Oh, absolutely. I agree 100%. I think that there's so much competition in the world of women and friendships are ruined over things like that. And it could have very easily been that way, but it wasn't. And I think that that's such a cool thing because even, even when we would see each other, either at Christmas time or whatever, after you guys were married and after I was married,
it was like old friends.
It was never weird.
Yeah.
It was always big hugs, and I love that because I think that it's just rare these days.
And I think looking back, we didn't realize what was going on. And we're going to get into this in a little bit, but you were coming from a place of hurt and healing that you needed. I was coming from a place of hurt and healing that I needed. And we were both ready for that. So we weren't even, I don't think we were consciously thinking of this, but we weren't going to allow anything else because we knew we had good people in our corner.
Right.
So that relationship didn't work, but we're not going to let that hinder this person I can tell is good for me. So I want to keep that friendship. I want to keep things moving in the direction they are because we needed that healing.
Absolutely.
I think that's it. And we were talking before we started, you know, we need to step back a lot of times and look at what's the reality behind the situations and not the emotion. Because if we make our decisions based on emotion all the time, that's when we get into some trouble. So I think it's just, you know, I think it's so, I love telling our story. I think it's so awesome. And it's just, it's one I hope people take away from their day to day.
Right.
Not every relationship's meant to be, you know, last, whatever. But what can you learn from it? What can you take from it to make the next one even better? Exactly. And you ended up marrying one of our other friends.
Yes,
from the group.
Exactly.
So in that shame.
I know, and it's fun that we can all get together, and it's not weird. No. It's fun. It's
like we all grew up together.
Yeah.
I mean, we were what? How old were we?
Babies.
I know.
We were babies.
Back now. So I'm 41. So we look back now and we're like, man, they were young, and I got married really young.
Yeah. So, and I'm older than you.
I won't ask. But I think it's an
I'm
awesome
not ashamed.
story. I think it's an awesome story. And I love telling people how we met. And it's a testament to, I think, our maturity even at that young age and spirituality. I think that's what led it.
Oh, yeah.
Not having pride.
Sure.
Staying humble. Just keeping those things at the forefront of your intention makes you choose differently. If your pride gets in the way, then it would have been different.
Right. And when you truly love someone, and we had such a great friendship and talked about everything. You know, when you're in college, you talk about everything. You talked about your past, my past, you know, all the things that we had been through up to that point. So we had a deep friendship and love for each other. And when you do truly love someone, you're not going to let those things get in the way.
Right.
And too many times it does.
So it's always really good advice when you're going through difficult situations, especially with people. Pause. Take a step back. What do I really want this outcome to be? You know, is this person good for my soul? Are they worth keeping around? You know, let's work on the things that may change, you know, and see where we want to go from there. So diving in a little deeper into the stories that we both have, you know, my situation with my family and growing up with a very controlling father, you know, is what I kind of came in with. And you came with your own story. So the college that we ended up at together wasn't your first college, right?
It was my third.
So how did that happen?
It happened because I was not healthy. When I went off to college, I really wasn't ready because I had been suffering from an eating disorder for several years at that point. And college was kind of my prize. It was like, if you get to this point, if you gain this amount of weight, then you can go to college. And so I would work towards that because I wanted to go to college because that's what you were supposed to do to be normal. And I just wanted to be normal for the first time in years. And so I worked hard to get there. Well, when I got to college, it was like, okay, I got here and I fell back into my old habits of not eating. And even though I had to weigh in on a weekly basis because that was the only way they would allow me to go to the college. And even then, I fell back into old habits. And so I ended up having to leave at the end of the first semester. So I sat out a semester. And then I, again, worked my way back into, okay, I'm doing great. You know, I can go. And I went to the second college and I didn't even make it the full semester, I ended up in the hospital because I had lost so much weight and I wasn't doing well. And so I went home and again, sat out. And I then went to the college that we went to. And I think because it was a smaller college and because we were in houses, it wasn't a dorm situation. And honestly, just walking into our room, just seeing your face and the other faces that were in there, it was so welcoming that I immediately felt at home and I felt comfortable. And I honestly, to this day, I believe that that first moment walking through the door is what gave me the incentive and the encouragement to...
The empowerment.
Yes, empowerment is a great word for it. To continue to do what I had to do to be healthy.
It's funny. I don't know if you remember this, but so we were talking earlier about I get teased a lot if I'm not smiling, I look mad. So that's been my persona my whole life because I learned as a child, if I keep my mouth shut and I don't talk out of turn, I won't get in trouble. I won't get yelled at. So that was a default setting for me, was just zip it. And that's what I became. So that was my default setting. So people didn't like me. They thought I was stuck up. That was kind of a general consensus, you know. So knowing that, the first day, I don't know if you remember this, I bought everybody a present and left it on their bed. Do you remember that? I bought everybody a book.
I only remember that now, though.
So it's just it's so awesome to be able to look back because we were all struggling, and everybody does. They just don't admit it. And you're obviously not going to like start a conversation with like, I'm struggling with this, but to look back. And I think, again, the reason why things work so well, because we were all ready to heal. So I came in like, I know no one's going to like me because I'm like stuck up, they think, but I'm really not. I'm like really wanting friends. So I bought everybody a present to hopefully they'll like me, you know? So, and you came in with the situation you had, obviously not going to be, this is the first conversation starter, but you came in and, you know, obviously energy is huge, and you walk into a situation and you feel love and you feel support, and then you can start to flourish. And that's why it's so important for us to remember none of us are an island. We need people. We need people in our corner.
And on the flip side, it helps. I try to remind myself whenever I meet somebody, even if they don't there's not an instant connection, I try to remind myself, I don't know what they're going through. I don't know what they're coming from. They could have been through something really horrible. And the reason why they're acting a certain way is because of that. And it's so easy for us to take things personally and to think,
they're treating me this way.
Why are they, you know, I don't really like them. But at the same time, we just have no idea.
Perspective. And being through a situation like you have and what I did, it gives us perspective for people. You see all over social media all the time, people posting, look how this person treated me. And I just saw it recently with a lady in the airport, and she got mad because people were holding her accountable for how she reacted to this lady that obviously had something wrong with her. And Brene Brown, I don't agree with her on hardly anything, but she has a lot of great thoughts on inner relationship ideas. And she made a statement one time about a parenthesis of grace. Give people a parenthesis of just a little segment of like, I might be catching them on their worst day of their life. Like my clients, you know, I catch people sometimes in the absolute worst time of their life, and they have no other choice, and they're at wit's end. They're coming to me for just a little relief, if nothing else.
That's so good.
And so to give people that parenthesis of grace is perspective. And if you always let pride rule the road, you can't help people.
No.
And what are we here for, if nothing else, than to be help to other people and grow ourselves? So your specific eating disorder was? Anorexia. So in my, again, like with the suicide story and some other stories I have, I never had a personal connection with anyone that had that. So I'm listening to podcasts over the past couple of months and listening to more information. So there's 30 million people that suffer from eating disorders. So I think it's a lot more common than we realize.
And it's not just women. It's not just girls.
100%. And that's a lot of what I was reading about and hearing and listening to other podcasts. And I'm a big gym rat. And that's a lost source for a lot of precursors to eating disorders.
It is.
Because I think people that aren't aware of that realm, they associate it all with mental issues.
Yes.
Someone has a mental issue. The precursor to an eating disorder many times is external. So someone in the gym is starting to get ready for a show. They start this really bad cycle of starvation and binging, and then they get out of the show, and that's a whole nother topic of the weightlifting world. But they've created this body that is not sustainable, and they do things to their brain that they turn on or off hormonally, and they just start this vicious cycle. And so I know, you know, with what you've been doing over the past few years with your blog and talking to other women and sharing your story, I think recently, and how many, in front of how many people?
500 in person, and I have no idea how many online.
Right.
I don't want to know.
But that's what happens when you do come on the other side of this, is you get a passion to help people. So I'm sure there have been many people that have contacted you since then. Hey, this is my story. This is how I'm in the middle of it now, or whatever. So in coming through that over the past few years, you probably met many people that have come about this in different ways.
Yes. And it's not, there's no certain age. It can be any age. It can be something that can lie dormant for years. You can go through it as a child, and it can lie dormant, and maybe something triggers it later on in life. But the universal thing that I've found with everybody is that it all stems from something internal, a hurt. It's, you know, a lot of people think it's just to look good.
Right.
That is a very small part of it, if any at all.
Right.
And it's interesting that you said that about exercise, because that's a form of purging.
Yes.
And, you know, a lot of people look at, which, you know, it's good to exercise. It's good to, I'm a 100, I love it.
Yeah.
However, I remember many times when I would be forced to eat when I didn't want to. I didn't suffer from bulimia in the technical sense.
Right.
But if I was stuck in a situation that I couldn't not eat and I had to eat, you better believe I was out there exercising as much as I could. Because I wanted to get rid of it.
Right.
So it is something to watch, and I have to be careful that I don't fall into that, even accidentally, you know.
And that's one thing, you know, I always talk about with every situation I bring up, I always talk about a plan. So if you're going into something like doing fitness competitions, in my opinion, you should have someone in your corner that is your baseline. Like, you know, how's all this going? You know, checking in with you, because as soon as the show's over, what do they all do? They binge, you know? So I think it would even be a good idea to have yourself set up with a counselor already, or a therapist to, you know, check in with. Because you're doing this thing that is like way outside of the scope of what your body should be doing. You're turning on that mechanism of the brain that says, we're starving, so we need to hold everything in. And just, there's lots of biology that goes behind that. But having a plan for things like that you know could spur on something. And to have a plan in that situation, I think is a very, very good idea.
Yes.
Just like going into marriage, it's a good idea to have someone in your corner as a therapist. I mean, we build a house, we're going to get someone that knows what they're doing. We want to save for retirement, we find someone that knows how to do that. These huge decisions in life, we need to have someone in our corner. But going back to your experience, just tell us a little bit in the very beginning, like for you, how did it get started?
Well,
maybe you didn't even know. You found that out later.
Yeah.
But what was the?
Well, it's interesting because obviously I've been through many counseling sessions trying to find the root of what happened. And, you know, it could have gone so far all the way back to the beginning. My biological father, pretty much when I was about 4 years old, just decided that he didn't, you know, want to be a father or a husband. And so he asked us to leave. So my mom and I left, and my mom continued to try to fight for that marriage, even though he didn't want anything to do with it. And so I maybe saw him once or twice after that, and then I never saw him again. So, I sometimes think that maybe that it started that need for approval, because you always think, even though my mom was wonderful and so supportive and so just loving and encouraging, you always think there's something wrong with you. And she went on to remarry when I was 10 years. Well, it was about, I was 9. And he's I consider him my dad. He adopted me, gave me his last name, and has been just my dad.
Yeah.
So it's not that I didn't have a father figure in my life. It's just that there was lacking for all those years. And you just always wonder if that had some bit to do with it. But then I went on into high school, and you have your normal high school. You have we didn't have social media at that time, and I'm so thankful. I think about that now, and I'm like, all of those things that happen would have been so much worse had there been social media. The bullying that takes place on there, and we work with the youth at our church, and you just see the things that happen, and it's a hard thing, and contributes to a lot of these types of things like anorexia and other things that they turn to, drugs, alcohol, which is rampant.
Yes.
But I think for me, it was a lot to do with, we were in a very legalistic environment, that compounded with all the other things. I think I just was constantly looking for approval. I felt like everything was out of my control. This was the one thing I could control in my life. And it started out small. I didn't go into it thinking, hey, I'm going to just stop eating.
You didn't flip a switch and think, I'm going to do this today.
No, it wasn't a conscious effort at all.
Right.
Like I didn't even think about it. I just slowly stopped eating because I could control it. And, about a year late, it was about a year before people started really noticing that something was wrong, because I had lost so much weight. And that's when people started taking notice and saying things. And at that point, it became my identity. It was who I was. And for some reason, when you're in that, you want to hold on to that. So recovery is hard because this has become your identity.
Yeah.
And so I just remember that, just hanging on to it for dear life. And, I went to counselors, and I was in eating disorder clinics. And I just remember just fighting against that.
I see that in so many situations. So a lot of people come to me because I do different work than just massage. I do cranial work, which is great for the nervous system. But I see so many people, like I mentioned earlier, stuck in their mindset of their trauma. And I think what it comes down to sometimes is, with some people, that's the first thing they talk about when you do meet them. Because it's almost like if they don't have that, like you said, as their identity, they lose the validation for what happened to them. And it may have been a horrible thing, but it happened 10 years ago. But they keep that close by because that is their validation for who they are as their identity. And until they realize they can have an identity outside of that, they're not going to heal.
Right.
So you, like you said, you went through many different kinds of therapy and different people. And, in listening to podcasts and researching this topic, that's a huge issue, is what is the best care for someone with an eating disorder? And if you aren't familiar with this or have a child or a family member, whatever, you need to do your research, because it's not, you can have disordered eating and there's eating disorders, which I learned there's a difference. Both are not good.
No.
And most individuals, like every individual has bad posture in some capacity that's going to lead to pain. Most individuals have disordered eating. Because we're making bad choices for different reasons. But, in your case, when you ask someone for this situation or that situation, what do you recommend someone do to get healing? And we talked about this earlier. And you basically said, everyone's an individual.
Right.
So, talk about some of your experiences in the bad way, like that did not work for me.
Right.
And then what down the road ended up happening that did work.
Well, in my senior year of high school, I started it all started the end of my sophomore year. So my senior year of high school is when my parents, that's when they really got concerned. And so I entered an eating disorder clinic that was in the area. And it was I would say it was not the best experience. There were a lot of philosophies that were shared in there that I did not agree with. And I felt like they were targeting, in a nutshell, they were targeting men as a source of my problem, my father, and it was primarily women that were in there, and it was not beneficial. It wasn't helping me to heal. It wasn't helping me to pinpoint the problem. It was really just focusing on issues that they had a problem with.
That's one of the things I read and heard a lot about was some people, because we're human, they have their own bias to what caused your thing.
Yes.
And that's what you're saying basically
absolutely.
happened.
Yeah.
So they were trying to get you to put your reasoning on this one thing. And you're like, yeah, that wasn't great, but that's not helping me to continue to harp on that.
Right. It wasn't pinpointing the problem for me.
Right.
And it's not to say that that's not a problem for some people. And I think that it just wasn't, they weren't covering all of the issues that could possibly be the problem.
I'm always going to go back to like physical analogies because that's what I do.
Yeah.
But I deal with it every day. People are going to great PTs and great chiros, and they're coming to me again with like a last resort, just make me feel good. And I end up helping them because I have a different way to look at the body. And so I encourage people that are dealing with this with family members or children, you can't just plug them into one avenue or outlet for healing and expect it to work because we are all a snowflake.
Right.
I say that all the time when it comes to pain management or trauma or anything like that. First, research, get referrals, talk to someone that had a similar situation you did, but you've got to really investigate the people that you're getting in your team to help to make sure they're doing the job because they are human too. Right. They could be there and hate their job.
Exactly.
They could be there and, as you said, you saw in one of the situations that you were in a care facility. And what did you see? Just tell everybody what you saw. Just like blows my mind.
Yes.
I mean, it just surprised me, but it's just like,
well, so our several of our therapists that were in the eating disorder clinic were recovering from an eating disorder of their own. And I happened to walk into the kitchen at one point, and one of my therapists was in there binge eating. And I mean, like, it wasn't just
it was ugly.
It was ugly. It was a binge,
Yeah.
And it was really traumatic for me because for an anorexic, that is just horrifying, you know, and it's something so it was just, for me, I just remember being like, this is the person that's supposed to be helping me.
Right.
You know, and it was really hard. And honestly, not long after that, my parents removed me from that place because it wasn't really helping.
And that's the mindset of being relentless is, okay, that didn't work. What can we do? What's next?
Exactly.
Not that didn't work. I'm done. Because that's when you really get in trouble.
Right.
Is when you give up.
Right.
And I tell my clients, this is a phrase I use all the time. If you're on this side of the dirt, there's hope. If we're breathing, there's hope. And that's relentless mindset is keep going. Okay, that didn't work.
Right.
What can we try that will?
And my dad was relentless.
Yeah.
He was ready to send me to Texas.
Yeah.
To a facility down there if he had to.
Right.
I mean, it didn't matter how much money it cost. It didn't matter what it was. He was willing to do whatever.
Right. That's awesome that you had that backup.
Oh, yes.
So continuing on, so we had those couple of situations where it didn't work.
Right.
But something obviously worked because you're here now and healthy and have a great family. So taking us through that process even further down the road, after you had a couple of, what you could view as a failure, but to me, there's no failures in life. There's only learning experiences. Right. After those experiences that just didn't work for you. So take us to the next step.
Well, we lived in Michigan, right on the border of Ohio and Michigan. And my dad heard about a pastor who was also a counselor in Detroit. And so he took me there on a whim. It was like, you know what?
Again, that's
how can it hurt?
for whatever will help.
Exactly.
And
it was not even in the denomination that we were in, which was a huge
That's a
deal.
whole other podcast.
Yes. And but we went up there, and he would take me up there weekly, and he helped me so much. It was he was able to identify the lies that I was believing about myself. He was able to identify just how subjective I was. I took a test. It was a subjectivity test and I scaled off the charts, which really means that I was focusing on me so much of every day. All I thought about was what I was eating, was I exercising to burn off what I did have to eat? Was I was so consumed with myself every day and what people thought of me. And so he was able to identify those, and he was able to help me identify those and see those. And then he just started attacking them and in a good way, helping me to
just getting your laser vision.
Address those things and to stop believing those things in my life. And I went to him for a while, and he got me heading in the right direction to where I could go on and just helping me to recognize how God sees me. Right. And it's not about how I see me, because we have a tainted view of ourselves.
Yes.
If you've ever met someone with an eating disorder, they'll look in the mirror, and what you see and what they see is totally different.
Right.
And I look back now and I see pictures of myself and I think, oh my goodness, how could I have not seen that?
Right.
Whereas when I was in the middle of it, I just thought, oh, I've got so much work to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's so much that goes into something like this that as parents of the children that have some of these issues, or individuals married to someone, so you have the precursor that may start the thing, but then once you're in it for a little bit, you have hormone issues and biological issues that are started that until they are handled, you can't think clearly. You're not being nourished. You're not getting oxygen to the brain. You're not getting nutrients to the brain. So then at that point, that's when it becomes a major health issue.
Yes.
And so basically, I think it was timing almost. It was timing for you that you came into this awareness of what the reality was, not your perception or your emotion. And it was just the right person. And again, going back to body stuff, and people ask me, should I try this? I'm like, yeah, try all the things. Try all of them.
Yeah.
Because you don't know how something's going to respond with your body.
Yeah.
And so it's awesome that you and your family were all just, what can we try next? Because you obviously wanted to heal.
Right.
It's just you weren't finding the right outlet or the right, like you said, that prompt to then look inside yourself, because there is no healing that can happen externally.
Right.
No matter what it is. I can provide some coaching, or I can provide some awareness, body awareness for someone, but they have to make the choice to change.
And it's interesting that you said timing, because this happened after the second failed attempt at college, and I ended up in the hospital, and I was in the hospital for several weeks, and it was a bottom point for me. It was the lowest point to where it was kind of like, if you keep going on this road, you're going to die.
Right.
I was having heart problems. I was not doing well at all. Yeah. And I think it scared me enough to really want to find the answer. And then we found him, and it's like God just put the pieces together.
Yeah. And that's another, it makes me think of another interesting fact is that eating disorders have the highest mortality rate of any mental illness because of that hopelessness, I would assume.
Yes.
And I think maybe the hopelessness, and then one day it smacks you in the face with the reality of what you've done to your body is a tough place.
Yes.
So that's why it's so important, if you're caring for someone in this situation, to be relentless for them. And that's what I've talked about before is sometimes we go through these things in life and we need to be told, okay, do this now. Get up and put your clothes on today.
Right.
Get up and brush your teeth today. And if you're that person, it's so hard to be a caregiver. And I worked with a group, Wounded Warriors, for a couple things. And I got the stats on the caregiver are just about as bad as the person they're caring for. Yes. So when you're with someone in this time of life, you've got to be relentless too. They've got to come to that point where they're relentless in that search and desire for healing. But I think that's a great point that you're making is one thing might, just like in our precursor story, right? One thing might not work and that's okay. You've learned, okay, now that doesn't work.
Yes.
What's the next thing? And we just have to keep going until we find that. So you're mom of 3 boys.
Yes.
So there's two avenues I want to go with this. So the first avenue is in raising your boys, in today's world, it's a hot topic of masculinity and manhood and all that. But in raising your boys, at what point with them did you share your story? And how did you start to cultivate them with the awareness of how to watch out for people and be, because your boys are so sweet. I know them. And you've obviously taken the opportunity to teach them about these things and have those conversations. So how did that play out with you and the kids?
I never hid what I went through with them growing up. I will say I didn't talk about it for a long time publicly. In fact, I did not share it except for my closest friends. I did not share it with people until I wrote a blog post about it. It's been about 2 years now. And that was the first time that I really shared it with anybody other than family and close friends. Because I didn't want to carry it as my identity because I was more than that. Yeah. And I knew that. Yeah. That was a piece of my history. It wasn't my history and it's not who I am. Right. So, and it's hard to do that.
You were figuring out how to, present.
Yes. Yeah. And I've always been very careful with it because I taught high school for 10 years. I never wanted a young girl to look at me and say, oh, but look at her. She's doing great. If I just go through this, I'll get to where I want to be and then I'll be fine. Yeah. Because it doesn't always end up that way. Right. It doesn't always turn out that way. So that's why I was very careful. But with our boys, I've always wanted them to appreciate who they are and everything about them. We have a lot of positive reinforcement in our house because I just know what affirmation can do in a child's life. And so I've shared my story with them from when they were younger and just really tried to get them to understand that you don't always understand everybody's story and people are going through things like we talked about earlier. And that's another thing I do want to bring up, if you don't mind, just recognizing, I think a lot of times we think people are okay. Parents think your kids are not going through something like this, whether it be drugs, alcohol, or an eating disorder.
Not my kid.
Not my kid. Yeah. And so you ignore signs and you don't want to call them out on something and be wrong and then be mad. Yeah. It's worth it to make sure that they're okay. And just watching for the signs. My parents, it took them a while. They didn't even know what to look for, and they felt bad about that. But it wasn't their fault. But that's why I want to bring awareness to this so that people can watch your children. And if you notice that they're not eating their lunch or they're pushing their food around on their plate or, they're wiping with the napkin. There's tricks. There's so many tricks. And I think it's so important to catch it in the young stages of it.
And in that mindset, there's a list of some do's and don'ts that I came across. And I want maybe you expound on a couple of those. One thing that you do is talk openly.
Yes.
So communication. Yes. Like you're saying, bring the topic up. Yes. Just like with suicide, it was a big thing. Speak. Just start the conversation.
I think families are afraid to talk. I'm an over communicator.
Just to make sure I catch it all.
I probably talk too much, but at the same time, I always want there to be an open line. And so I think that it's important. Parents today think that they're overstepping their bounds by or invading their privacy by asking them too many questions. And you can't think that way.
Right.
We have to be. We have to protect our children, and we have to do that by communicating.
One of the don'ts was, but don't try to be a therapist.
Yes. Yes.
And we can fall into that, especially, us that want to fix everything.
Yes.
Well, we see that what's going on. Well, let me fix it. How can I fix it?
Right.
So don't do that.
No.
Yeah.
No, because that puts them on the defensive.
Right.
And then they shut up and they don't want to talk anymore. Yeah.
Remember, an eating disorder is not about food.
That's exactly right.
I think that's a big one.
Yes, and it's a misconception.
Yeah, and that's from the outside looking in. We're just very visual. Well, just eat your food.
I can't tell you how many times I was told that.
Yeah,
and in my head, I was going, I can't.
Right, and that's where it comes to. As soon as you do see there's something, you immediately need to get on board with some type of care, I would think.
Yes,
and find out what that is. Don't offer simple solutions like just eat or just get over it.
Right.
So talk about, some of the things that were said to you that were harmful, but then also the converse, like, when you came into college and you found a group of loving people, things that were helpful. So what are some of the things specifically to someone with an eating disorder that were negative and positive that were said to you?
That is a great point, the oversimplified answers, because to everyone else, it is simple.
Right.
They don't understand not being able to physically eat. But to someone with an eating disorder, and anorexia specifically, there were times that I could not even swallow because you have gotten your body to a point to that and mentally that you can't even swallow. And it just frustrates the person. So those were the oversimplified, just eat. I don't understand what the problem is. You look great. Well, to them, they don't.
Right.
And it doesn't matter how much you say it. It's not going to change the fact that they don't think they do.
Right.
So honestly, the thing that helped me the most was when people treated me like I was normal. Like when I went to college and people just loved me and they knew, when I eventually opened up and shared, with you guys. But you guys loved me and just treated me the same. And, there were times that I struggled because I was on the recovering end. It took me about a year into that to the college to help me to really recover. But I remember there were times that I wouldn't eat and I couldn't even think straight. I had a professor that actually knew that I hadn't had lunch and I bombed a test, bombed it. And he came and found me and he said, you didn't have lunch, did you? And I said, no, I didn't have time.
Right.
The excuses,
Right, yeah.
I was busy. And he said, okay, he took me to the cafeteria, sat me down, got me lunch. It wasn't even lunchtime. It was in between meals, went and got me food. And he said, eat this and then come back and take the test. And it was just people showing me compassion and love, at the same time holding me accountable,
right,
and not brushing it under the rug. And it was those types of things that helped me.
Yeah. One of the other do's that I have is realize that while your loved one needs recovery, that it won't happen until they want it for themselves. So as much as we want to, like you said, people to just do it, no matter our passion or drive behind their healing, it has to become internal.
Yeah, absolutely. It has to be their choice. We can't do it for them.
Right.
And for us to try to, I know my mom, bless her heart, she just, it was so hard. It was so hard. She would cry. Yeah. But it couldn't be her choice. It had to be mine. Just like with an exercise program or an eating program, it has to be their choice to do it. You can't do it for them, and you can't make them want to do it.
Yeah. Which can be a precursor to eating disorders.
Exactly.
Yeah. So one of the don'ts is don't pretend that it will go away.
Right.
So don't ignore it. And sometimes we just don't want to handle a situation, or
we think it's a phase.
Right. Right. That's a good point.
A lot of people think it's just a phase.
When you're dealing with health, you don't.
No.
Just think.
Or it's stress. We can explain away a lot of things in life, especially if it's a loved one.
Yeah.
And just like with drugs and alcohol, we try to give excuses, but that's an absolutely good point.
So you have 3 boys.
Yes.
But what about in raising a girl? So I know you shared with me some of the things that you went through in high school was, bullying over your body type, and bullying over, or just rude, crude comments over your body developing before other girls. So that's one of the things, and posture comes from presence and comes from internal thought process of who we are. So that's something I deal with teenage girls, and I have a daughter, and teaching them to be proud of your body, no matter what phase it's in. If you're having a bad day, borrow mom's red lipstick and go out there and tackle the world. That's kind of how I handled some of the zit phase and the bad hair days. But in raising girls, since you've been through this, do you have any advice for moms that are trying to watch out for their daughters and have a preemptive strike on some of these things?
Well, a lot of the body type issues for me were because we were in a legalistic environment, and because I developed before a lot of the girls my age, I couldn't find the cute stuff to wear that fit our rules. Yeah. And that was frustrating for me. And that too led to poor posture because I was trying to hide. And that's something I have fought the rest of my life, trying to,
it's ingrained in
to fix that.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest thing that we just have to do a better job of doing what you do, encouraging them, helping them to see how beautiful they are. Everybody's a different body type, and they're all beautiful.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's such a society has made this one body type or this one type of person to be what we should all aspire to be, and that's not true.
Right.
We should celebrate our unique differences. And I think that I try to do that even with my boys.
Yeah. They need it
because there's a constant attack on them.
Yeah.
And I feel like moms, if I had a daughter, I would do what you do. You're doing a great job. I mean, I think that's fantastic because really you're going to have those days where you don't feel good, where you have a breakout, your hair is not doing the right thing. Yeah. And unfortunately, kids can be cruel, intentionally and non-intentionally. I mean, they're not always trying to be mean, but they're blunt and they say things. And
no filter.
Yes, there's no filter. And so I think that making sure that there is positive reinforcement at home goes a long way to helping them fight what's outside of the home, to know, okay, I am beautiful. It doesn't matter. Yes, I've got a breakout today, but I am a strong, confident person, and just constantly having that positive reinforcement. Because if we don't do it at home, they're not going to get it.
They're either not going to get it, or they're going to get it from a place we don't want them to get it from.
Exactly. Excellent point.
Yeah. And
Excellent
I think
point.
It's just like anything with health. You have to have stuff in your tool belt to be prepared for the things that are going to come.
Yes.
You are going. I had a infected bursa sac in my elbow a couple weeks ago that just blew my arm up. But me being healthy shortened my phase of recovery.
Yeah.
And so thinking about the health situations, thinking about these things, giving your children the tools they need to be ready for these things, and being honest with them. People are not all rosy. People are not all, and when you have things in your home like divorce, like separations, you have to be even more on target with these things intentionally. And ask for help.
Yes.
I see so many families and moms, we take on the burden of the world.
Yes.
If you're a single mom, if you are having a health crisis, you've got to reach out to that community around you. Even if you don't think they're there, they're there. There are people around you that want to help you.
Yes.
We just have to have the humbleness to ask for that help. So if you're going through this situation with your children, with yourself, whatever, you have to start the process somewhere to get the help.
Yes.
Start asking.
Yes. I recently was talking to a mom who was having issues with her boys, and she was just asking me some, how do I do this? The one thing that I had to get over was my pride. We want to be all things to our children.
Yes.
We want to be their go-to for advice, for everything.
Yeah.
And we are not always equipped to do that.
Right.
Sometimes we need somebody else to step in, because half the time they'll listen to them before they'll listen to us.
Yes,
it's just
I tried
how it
to coach
is.
my daughter and teach her piano lessons.
Yes, it's just how it is. It's
Yeah.
not that they don't love us. It's just that
we're always going to be mom.
We don't know anything right now. But
Yeah.
What I've learned is that we have done such a good job, and we've worked at it, of surrounding our kids with people that are good, solid people, people that we trust, that to speak into their life and to be an example for them. And I have had to put aside my pride and reach out to those people and say, look, this is what we're going through. Could you just encourage them or talk to them? And they'll go to them, not say anything about us having talked, but just say, hey, how's it going?
Yeah.
Get them talking.
Yeah.
And then sometimes they're able to speak into their life where I wasn't able to.
Right.
But we have to get past our pride and allow that to happen, and utilize those people that are in our tribe.
And I think another way to look at that is, I had a situation where I had a mom, and they were going through financial crisis, and they were lying to their children, and they were covering up and masking and doing some wrong things financially. And I said, you're losing the opportunity for your children to see you go through a very difficult time.
Yes.
See you properly go through it and handle it with faith and wisdom and meekness and asking for help and asking for love, and show them how to do it.
Yes.
Because if they don't see you do it, when it happens to them, they're going to lose it and they're not going to handle it right. So switch your mindset to thinking, I failed my kids, or, because we, like you said, we're so hard on ourselves, but these things are going to happen.
Yes.
We're either going to have financial difficulty, difficulty with our health, difficulty with our relationship, or all of them, probably all of them. So show your children how to manage that.
Yeah.
We're missing a huge opportunity to be a teacher and let them see and be honest with them. They can handle more than we think. You don't have to give them all the details. No. Please don't.
Right.
But just say, listen, we're having a hard time right now. Yes. And what I've seen, because my husband and I are both self-employed, that's crazy. That can bring some craziness. It's just like, listen, guys, this is what's going on. Yeah. And they're like on board to help or on board to do more. And then now, hopefully, when they become older and have their families, they remember, we went through this as a family when I was a kid. I know how to handle this. Yes. And that's a big issue that we're missing in trying to be perfect because no one is.
Right.
No one is perfect. No one has it all figured out.
No, I think that's an excellent point. Communication, again, in your family. We don't hide those things. And I think that it is good because just like you said, they're gonna encounter those things in their own lives. And if they've never seen it before and they've never seen you successfully come out of it,
right,
then they're not going to know how to handle it.
Exactly. So you could actually prevent them from repeating either your behavior or some other behavior they've seen by how you handle a situation. Yes. And that's exactly why I have you here. Because that's, I've never dealt with that situation. So I don't know how to communicate about it.
Right.
You've been through this and you've seen what has happened. And now you can help people and you can be that encouragement. There's no better advice to come from someone than someone that's been through it. So last question, and anything else you want to bring up, please feel free. And this is kind of a big question, but so in my research and study and listening, some people say this is something you'll never get over. Some people say I'm fully recovered and I've moved forward and my life is different now. Where is your take on that?
It's interesting that you bring that up because that was the one thing that was really frustrating to me when I was a teenager and going through this. The therapist that I went to basically told me, you'll never get over this. There was no hope. And it was frustrating to me because it was like, well, then why try?
Right.
But there is hope. And I think that's the one thing that I try to use my story to express to people is that there is hope, that you can get through this. Do I ever have issues that arise? There are trigger things when I go through a stressful, time. Your knee-jerk reaction, if I feel like everything's out of control, I want to control what's in my realm of possibility to control.
Right.
But at the same time, do I ever revert to that? No, because I've learned what happens when you do. And I've learned why I can't go back there or why I shouldn't. And when you learn those tools to help you through these situations and you are able to find your identity in something other than what you can control or what you look like or what people think of you, then you are able to get through those stressful times. But there's absolutely hope. And that would be the one thing I would want to convey to everybody is that there is no, this is your sentence for the rest of your life.
And it's exactly like you can say the word anorexia, but you can put anything in that sentence. Whatever it is you're dealing with,
any addiction,
any pain pattern, any trauma, anything in your life. And you spoke to it briefly, but the neurology behind this, it's just like someone that has had a leg amputation. They can learn to walk again, but it takes time. It takes muscle memory. And what you said it so perfectly is, yes, that knee-jerk reaction is there, but the proof of the healing is I can be aware and acknowledge that thought process, but I'm going to choose to do this.
Yes.
And that's
always
true
a
healing.
choice.
It is always a choice. And this just gives me chill bumps because that's true healing. Because we aren't perfect. The forgive and forget thing, we can't forget the things that have happened. It's when those things come into our life and we are triggered by them, what choice do we make? Do we choose to put ourselves in a positive mindset? Do we choose, I'm having a bad day, I need some more help, honey. I need to go on a date or I need to go do something fun. And that's the tool belt we're pulling from that helps us stay on the right path. I think that's just a great way to end this is there's a choice. There is hope because you're living it. And you're married for how many years?
Well, it'll be 20 in
June. And, your boys are happy and healthy and you've given them such a great example. And I just think it's so, this topic will never go away because we're human.
Yes.
And we have the choice that we have in every situation is going to hinder us or help us.
Right.
So I hope this podcast has been one that gives you a little tidbit of information because it's a huge topic and takes years to recover from, I assume. But I hope that, in your area, wherever you are, if you're dealing with this yourself, with a friend or family member, that you do your research,
Yes.
do the due
and
diligence.
There's a lot of information out there.
There's a lot. So you need to not just choose one and go with it and think you're done,
right?
But be willing to put in the legwork because this takes time to recover from.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
I appreciate your friendship.
Yes.
I appreciate your willingness to be open about the topic and share with us your struggles and your victories. And
I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. And I look forward to seeing more. Well, we'll post all of her blog information so you can follow. What is the name of it?
Simply Golden.
Simply Golden. So she's Theresa Golden. She's not Theresa Loudenslager. You'll still always be Theresa Loudenslager to me. I'll probably still be the long blonde hair volleyball player to you.
At heart, we are.
Yeah, exactly. I still feel like that on the inside anyway. But thank you so much for joining us for this episode. I hope it's been a blessing and an encouragement. I'll put the links to her blog down below so you can follow along with her story and her family. But again, thank you for joining us. Please seek help if you're dealing with any of these situations and continue on your path to find strength in your mental, physical, and emotional sides of life. Thanks so much, guys. Have a good day.